What's up? What are we talking about?
It's like actually one of the more degrading things someone could ask me after I spent 4 hours prepping for this episode.
Startup stuff?
Oh God, you're such an asshole.
I read most of those notes while I was getting pricked.
I'm literally sitting here with a beautiful mind's worth of information.
With the needle, dude. I read it. When Rihanna walked in the room, the other two girls disappeared.
Yeah, exactly.
I read it. I read the whole thing.
What's up, everyone? I'm Alex Lieberman.
Yo, this is Jesse Pujji.
And this is The Crazy Ones. Okay, we're back with episode 25 of The Crazy Ones. We have an awesome lineup today, but first, just want to do a little life update, work update with Jesse and myself. Jesse, what's going on in your world?
It's the grind. It's we're taking sales calls. We've got for Kahani, we've got a bunch of people who are signed up for trials. And so it's kind of an exciting moment where we're going to, we sort of said, hey, we got to make these next 10 customers the happiest, best customers ever. My engineering lead, Adam, he's a wonderful product engineering guy. And so he's like, we're basically talking to the customers constantly and saying like, what else do you need? What can we build? And it's almost like a services approach to product. Like as we hear things, we're like, okay, we should build that. We should build that. And so...
And just one quick thing. You said you have these 10 customers that are going through trials right now. Is a trial with Kahani a free trial for like 30 days and then they pay? Or is it a lower tier that goes into a higher tier? What is it?
It's 30 days free. And what we're trying to do is validate 5 to 10x ROI on the software based on lift that it generates, revenue lift that it generates. And so what we found is that when people engage with Kahani, their conversion, their time on site, somewhat intuitively all jumps and improves dramatically. And so you're trying to validate that with the customers during that trial.
By the way, outside of work, you went skiing, right?
Yeah, beginner. Went down a few greens.
Was that your first time ever, or you've skied before?
It wasn't my first time ever, but more or less was my first time ever. I sporadically went 2 or 3 times as a kid, as like a teenager or a kid, and just like did it for half a day and was like, okay, that's cool. And so then I went 2 weeks ago with my kids for the first time there's like a local place here called Hidden Valley. It's like a tiny little hill, and like got brushed up. And then I went to Deer Valley, it's so gorgeous. Like I want to go back as soon as I can.
It's incredible. When we end up skiing together, the first thing I'm going to do is to teach you how to dress the part, because I saw a picture of your ski outfit and it looks like you were a skier from 1955 wearing wooden planks on your feet. Jesse had the full getup with the suspender one-piece style ski pants, which I haven't seen someone wear
pants on, dude. They were awesome.
30 years. So I'm going to teach him how to dress the part when we go skiing together.
What about you? Are we going to get Kahani on the Plunge to show the app?
I mean, to me, that's a best case scenario. If the Plunge ends up being successful, or when it ends up being successful, and we have a successful Kickstarter launch, I'll be a customer of Kahani. The Plunge is progressing. China is getting back to their factories from Chinese New Year. I didn't realize it's a month-long process of basically factories being closed in China because hundreds of millions of people emigrate to their homes for the holiday, and then they have to emigrate back. So factories are back, so we're testing the product. I'm going through the Kickstarter pre-launch process. I have 17 social videos ready to go as soon as the site is up. So things are moving, and it's very close to crunch time to see if people actually want this product or not.
Do you feel nervous?
I do feel nervous. We're going to talk about it in the episode, what it
Alex,
looks like.
one-hit wonder Lieberman.
Oh, God.
Your biggest fear?
Jesse is just speaking my biggest fear right now. No, I have enough confidence now, though, to say even if this doesn't work out, I'm going to just keep taking at-bats until something does work out. But we're going to talk about it later in this episode, what it looks like to effectively test business ideas and how to validate them, because I actually think while I've been pretty cheap and scrappy with the Plunge, I've spent $20,000 on it so far. I actually think there are ways that I could have tested this for far less and known more. So with that, let's hop into the episode. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to The Crazy Ones. We're on episode 25. It's crazy how many episodes we've been through. It feels like we started this show yesterday. We have an awesome lineup today. We are going to be talking about the business of Rihanna. We had to talk about her after her Super Bowl performance. Then we're going to be getting into startup ideas and specifically how to test them. Everyone wonders when they have an idea for a business, like, how do I, in the cheapest, quickest way possible, know if there's actually something here or not? We're going to talk about that. And then we're going to follow up or finish up with Startup AMA, where an awesome listener asked us basically, how much should you tell your company versus not tell your company in terms of the numbers? So let's do this thing. Jesse, did you watch the Super Bowl / halftime show?
I did.
What do
Go
you think?
Chiefs. Go. I call them the Missouri Chiefs now, by the way.
Are you a Chiefs fan?
I am. I'm a Missouri Chiefs fan. Well, so my history of the NFL, I was a huge Rams fan. I mean, the die-hard Rams fan you could imagine. I watched Sunday Ticket every Sunday for 10 years while the Rams were terrible. Because, the Kurt Warner era, you might have been a little young for that.
No.
Okay.
He was huge when I was growing up.
And then, they scorched the earth when they left St. Louis. Like it wasn't like they were like, thanks, St. Louis, we're going to go to LA. It was like they like shat on the city for they wrote a 40-page paper about how St. Louis is a terrible place, and they like defrauded. They ultimately settled for $1 billion. St. Louis.
I didn't know any of what you just said. I didn't know they wrote a 40-page paper. I didn't know that there was a lawsuit.
It was all bad faith. So then between that, I watched that movie Concussion with Will Smith, and then my son was born, which means like Sundays I didn't have all day to sit around watching football anymore. Didn't want to. I kind of just stopped becoming an NFL fan, and then I moved back to St. Louis, and basically nobody talks about the Rams here. Everyone talks about the Chiefs. And so now I'm just like, the Missouri Chiefs. So it's not. I don't quite. My heart's not there in the same way like it would be what it was for the Rams or the Cardinals. But yeah, hey, I'm a Chiefs fan. Why not?
Yeah, I feel like that. There's actually like a not a good soft spot, like a bad soft spot in your heart from just everything that went down with the Rams after like a lifetime of following this team. And it seems like, of all the ways for a team to leave a city, they didn't do it in necessarily the most graceful way.
But anyway, I watched. Rihanna's awesome.
What do you think about the halftime
with
show?
My wife, she's on my list of 5. She's a little old now, but
oh my God,
when I was younger, it was
what do
awesome.
You think about that? You thought it was good?
I appreciated in his very Rihanna style how she didn't have anyone else show up. Like, normally
I thought it was going to happen.
She's like, nah, I got this. I've got so many songs. I've got so much can get everyone's attention. It was awesome.
Yeah, I want to just call out a few things about the halftime show before we talk about kind of just like the story of Rihanna and why in so many ways I think there are lessons that entrepreneurs can learn from how she's built businesses around herself. The first thing is, do you know how much she was paid for the show?
I know, $0.
$0. Yeah, $0. Super Bowl acts or halftime acts do not get paid for the show. She does, though. The Super Bowl pays a very healthy amount of money for producing the show. So the Super Bowl fronts $15 million. That's how much they front $15 million for between 2,000 and 3,000 part-time workers, the lights, the actual production, the marketing. If you go over that number, then you have to pay for it. So like, I think I read Dr. Dre and The Weeknd each spent $7 million above the quota for their shows. The interesting thing, so if you watch the show, she basically turned this show into an ad, right? So Fenty Beauty, right? It's now like this screenshot all over the internet, especially in the e-commerce part of Twitter, where she took out her Fenty Beauty mirror and she put on makeup mid-show. Yeah. And I think this happens with any act, but it was interesting to see searches for Fenty Beauty are up 883% after the show. Now, I do wonder how much it actually impacts sales, because if you look at like Google search trends, Fenty went from, call it like in the 20s to 100 at the time of the show, and now it's like back down to like 30-ish. So you're going to get that bump. But I thought what was really cool about it is, first of all, a Super Bowl ad cost $7 million. So she basically got a free ad. Second, she did it that was the most obvious way that she showed up.
She got like 10 free ads, to be clear. Because the Super Bowl ad is 30 seconds long.
Yeah. Totally. So her show was 15 minutes. So she got like the world's longest ad. She also had like, I would say the most obvious advertisement, but there was a lot of native advertisement that was going on that you had no idea about. So for example, like all of her backup dancers were wearing Savage Fenty, which is her lingerie brand. They were all wearing her clothing. They were all wearing the beauty products. If you go to Fenty Beauty right now, you can buy Rihanna's Super Bowl look, right? So they have all of the products that she wore and you can buy it. I don't know how they come up with these numbers, but supposedly there was $5.6 million in estimated media impact value. I have no freaking idea how they calculate these things. They feel very arbitrary to me, but $5.6 million in estimated media impact value for Fenty Beauty and $2.6 million for Savage Fenty. But I think the craziest part of this whole story is that Rihanna is like not a musician anymore. And I don't mean to say that in the way like I'm, dissing her not producing music, but it's been amazing to just see how she has reinvented herself in her career, right? She hasn't come out with an album. Her 8th album came out, I believe, in 2016. So she hasn't come out with an album in 7 years. She hasn't performed publicly in 4 years. And so I think like the really interesting story here is how she was able to reinvent herself and how she made the vast majority of her wealth, $1.8 billion in net worth. I believe 1.6 of it is from her two businesses, Fenty Beauty and Savage Fenty.
And hold on, I mean, you kind of buried the lead there. She's like a multi-billionaire.
Oh, yeah. It's incredible.
I don't think most people know that, right? When you think of Rihanna, you think of like club jams. You don't think of like multi-billionaire astute businesswoman, which she clearly is.
Yeah, and I think, there are so many lessons to learn from her story, but I would say just for a second, like I don't think people realize how massive Fenty is. Like I really didn't know anything about Fenty because I'm not, in the demo for the product, but like this thing, it launched in 2017 and she launched as a 50-50 joint partnership with LVMH. And it was done through Kendo, which is like LVMH's product incubator. And she did by 2018. So a year after it launched, it was doing $550 million in revenue.
Oh my God.
$550 million in revenue in 2018. And at that time, it was the valuation of Fenty was reported at $2.8 billion. And they haven't reported numbers on the business since then. But I know last year they said sales doubled in Fenty. So if you just use like the most conservative numbers and you look at what LVMH does like in their business. So revenue for perfume and cosmetics for LVMH in 2022 was $7.72 billion. At minimum, let's say Fenty's revenue is $1.1 billion. But it's way more than that because I'm just taking the 2x of 500 something million from 2018.
Right.
That means that Fenty Beauty accounts for at least 15% of all of LVMH's beauty sales. It's like this thing is a behemoth. And I think there's two huge lessons just from this brand. One is this idea that, as we see all these creator companies launch businesses, I think the very easy pit that creators are going to fall into is they're going to say, I have a massive freaking audience. If I launch anything, any product that my audience cares about, it will be successful. And they are actually, I would say, for massive influencers like Rihanna, they are probably right to some extent. Like they can do quick money grabs, but to build a brand that truly is bigger than Rihanna, like I believe Fenty will be known as a brand long beyond Rihanna and people won't associate it with Rihanna in the future. To do that, you really need to create a brand that's truly differentiated that would have been a great product and a movement outside of the creator. And so like there's actually like a phrase now, it's known as the Fenty effect. And like Fenty is known for bringing awareness to inclusivity in makeup because I didn't realize all this, but like the whole pitch of Fenty is that there are so many women of color that never had options for their makeup. And they were the first beauty brand, their first product, their foundation. They came out with 40 shades of the product. And one of their original advertisements was 40 women, all different skin colors wearing Fenty. And like, that was a massive underserved audience. Rihanna being one of the people in that audience who felt like they were underserved before that. So I just think that's a huge thing, which is like creator brands can be big, but to truly have them grow outside of the person themselves, it has to be a movement in itself.
Yeah, I think some of the principles for me, as you're talking, I think one is, I mean, I say this all the time: leverage your unfair advantage. She two at least two unfair advantages. She's obviously widely known, and then she knows the problem that this customer has because she is the customer in this case, right? And I think what you're saying is it can be a great spark to get things going, but it can't be the end all be all. You still have to go build a real business and a real brand. And I think I've seen similar things with like Growth Assistant. Like that's an audience I know. They trust me. They want to get they could potentially get someone offshore from anywhere, but no, they come to us because they believe that it's going to be different and better because of my name, my brand, my experience. The other thing that I think is interesting is like just there's a lot of entrepreneurs listening to this show. Like, man, the value of ownership is just so compelling, right? Like there's this new movie coming out. You and I should go see it together, called Air. Have you seen this?
No, but I assume it's about the Jordan brand.
It's about the Jordan brand, but it's specific. There's a big controversy over who actually signed Jordan and who actually got that deal done. And so it's actually it explores that controversy. But obviously, we all know Air Jordan. We know that that's a huge part of his wealth and his legacy and Nike's success. And yes, he's made billions of dollars, but man, he's made nothing compared to what he's generated. Right? He's very much been an employee, not an owner.
And it's a licensing deal, right?
Yeah, totally. And in her case, she's what, a 50% owner or whatever, 30 to 50% owner of these things. And I bet her revenue is 10% of what Jordan's, Nike's revenues are associated with him, but she's probably made more money from it. And so the value of ownership, and I think it's the right thing for these celebrities and a lot of these folks to get involved in because they are the ones driving the success of these ventures.
Yeah, I think to your point, like deal structure really does matter. And yeah, I was reading on Jordan, he's made $1.3 billion from the shoe, but he makes on average 10 to 15 bucks a shoe because he's getting 5% of sales. It's just a 5% licensing fee. Right. Where to your point, she has 50-50 in Fenty Beauty. So I think the way the original deal worked out was LVMH put $30 million in. She had to contribute $30 million in-kind contribution. So her time, her marketing, etc. And then I think she also owns a third of Savage Fenty, which is her lingerie brand. So yeah, like the structure matters a ton. The other thing I'll just point out about this story and about her story is, first of all, I didn't realize just like how young Rihanna is because she's been around for so long, but she's 34 years old. She came out with her first album when she was 17 after she was signed by Def Jam in 2005. Also, fun fact, I didn't realize this. Did you know Jay-Z discovered her? And when he first discovered her, I didn't realize this. When he first discovered her, he actually like was kind of iffy on her. Then she performed a second time for him. And he was like, okay, yeah, she's not leaving the room until we sign her. But it goes back to our conversation about Richard Branson, which is like the thing that to me is remarkable about Richard Branson is similar to what you were saying about Rihanna. Like he leans into just what he's great at and he builds infrastructure around that. But also he's not afraid of taking at bats. And what you see with all these people who have massive businesses, or with many of them, is like you see the home run, but then very few people talk about like the strikeouts or the singles that were hit before that. So when I was going through her story, there are so many other products that she has built or been a part of that you have no idea about because this is just the big win. Like she did her first makeup deal with MAC Cosmetics in 2013. She ended up doing another collaboration in makeup in, I think, 2015. Like all of these things were baby steps to ultimately launch this brand in 2017. And so I think it's just important to point out because it wasn't like this was her one and done thing. Like she didn't find lightning in a bottle.
And we shouldn't underestimate LVMH as a powerhouse business backed with that likely had a lot to do with the success, right? Gets immediate distribution into Sephora, so I'm sure they've earned their 50% also, right?
Totally. So all of this to say, Rihanna's a badass. She has found so much success outside of just music. And
she performed pregnant in front of like 1 billion people, and she crushed it.
There's that small detail. Also, to me, like one of the coolest parts about it is she's always talked about how her biggest idol is Madonna. And the funny part about that is Rihanna is the second most selling female artist of all time in terms of albums. Madonna's number one. And the reason Rihanna said that she loves Madonna so much is because she loves how she was able to reinvent herself constantly. And so like, it's actually a very interesting thing to see. Like Rihanna has done exactly that from having just like this deep appreciation for a woman who proved that. And I think the final thing that I walk away from her story with is like, this woman has so deeply understands the value she brings to the world, and she's found so many ways to monetize that value. So like I was going through, what are all the ways that Rihanna makes money? And it's like 10 different ways. She's made money from movies, from her music, sponsorships, like Samsung, one of her early tours, Samsung paid $25 million to be a sponsor of her tour. She has her beauty product, lingerie, fragrances. She's supposedly coming out with a hair product. She just like basically anywhere where she's a knowledgeable customer, she launches something, and then she leverages her distribution to help launch the thing.
Yeah. And there's kind of this formula. You see it across Branson. You see it with her. Like, get really good at one thing to get you to a certain level, and then you can kind of fan out and do a variety of different things. And I think that's one theme. The other big one for me is like, especially on entrepreneurship Twitter and some of these other things, everyone's so focused on doing it the right way versus doing it their way. And this is something I've like had to dial back at myself, because I just used to be like, oh, what's the right way? What's the right answer? How do you, and it's like, no, what do you want? And can you actually just sort of do what you want and what speaks to you versus trying to get the answer right? And I think like you couldn't draw up her story to do it right, but she kind of just was herself and found her own problems and made it happen, which I think is awesome.
Totally. All in all, Rihanna absolutely crushes it. She's the GOAT. And I'm sure we're going to continue to see more business success from her. Next topic on the show is business ideas, and not just how to think of them, but how do you actually test them? And how do you learn quickly in the cheapest, quickest way possible, whether it makes sense to pursue or not? We're going to talk about it in a second, but first, a word from the folks who pay our bills. This episode of The Crazy Ones is brought to you by Electric. Here we are, well on our way into 2023. The markets may still be uncertain, but one thing's for sure. Your business needs a rock-solid security plan, and pronto. Need IT you can count on? Electric is known for their lightning-fast IT support, proactive security standardization across devices, apps, and networks, streamlined employee onboarding and offboarding, and a 105% ROI to boot. And you won't just be snagging dependable IT pros with Electric. They will also gift you a pair of AirPod Pros when you take a qualified meeting with them. You must be an IT decision maker at a US-based company with 10 to 500 employees to qualify. Visit electric.ai/crazyones to learn more and book your qualified meeting. That's electric.ai/crazyones. Some things just leave you guessing, like, why are yawns contagious? But you know who doesn't leave you guessing? MailChimp. MailChimp analyzes data points from billions of emails to offer up personalized recommendations to help you improve areas like email content and audience targeting. Get started today at MailChimp.com/guesswork. That's MailChimp.com/guesswork. Let's be real. Business owners can't do everything. There are just too many fires to put out on the daily, from managing benefits coverage for employees to navigating intricate payrolls to dealing with compliance penalties. But to level up your biz, you're going to need the confidence to handle all of these challenges. Here's a pro tip. Don't do it alone. ADP's PEO, ADP Total Source, is here to help. As a leading PEO, ADP's seen it all, from helping businesses handle tricky employee situations to managing turnover and compensation. And with up to 53% of small businesses getting sued by their employees every year, ADP Total Source stands with you. They back you with their EPLI policy, and they're the only PEO that stands behind their advice with a legal defense benefit. Terms and conditions apply, but this is a big deal. And the cherry on top, research has shown that businesses that partner with a PEO grow 7 to 9% faster. It's a no-brainer. Partner up with ADP Total Source. Want to see if your business is a good fit for a PEO? Go to adp.com/thecrazyones to find out. That's adp.com/thecrazyones. We were brainstorming ideas for today's show, and I sent you a bunch of ideas about like big, problems that early stage startups go through, and I think your response was like, let's combine a lot of these into this one topic. The one topic being like validating ideas for startups. Why was that one that you landed on? Like, why do you feel like that's a really important topic to talk about?
Yeah, I think there's kind of two angles I feel around it. One is like the call, people get on the phone, hey Jesse, can I get your advice? Can we talk about something? And they'll give me this pitch, and I'll just oftentimes find myself asking like, well, have you sold this to any customers? Like, no, I talked to 10 and I validated. I'm like, but have you ever pitched it to them? Have you asked them for money? No, I haven't. And I obviously appreciate visionaries. We talked about that with Branson. I myself think of the future and where it's going to be. But I often just find entrepreneurs getting stuck with either overbaking their idea before they actually go into the world, or like severely underbaking it and not being realistic with themselves. And I thought it'd be a great topic to kind of flesh out. The other reason, by the way, for people who work inside of companies, it's actually an experience I've had with a lot of people who work for me, is I will go, oh, we should do blah, 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 blah. And you'll see their face and they'll kind of be excited. Then they'll get overwhelmed. And then they've interpreted what I've said as like, go build, a skyscraper, when what I really want them to do is like throw up a balloon and just see if the thing works or not, right? And so even for those listening who aren't maybe entrepreneurs, you said it and I want to just say it again, it's like, what is the cheapest, fastest way you can get anything going and you can start to try anything? And I think that question isn't just for a founder, but it's for especially employees at startups. When someone talks about an idea, your immediate thing should go cheapest, fastest, and try to go figure out whether that there's a there there. The third thing, by the way, is interesting is it's pretty different in my experience from B2B versus B2C. And so figuring that part of it out, I think is another piece that's worth talking about.
Yeah. Well, I can just start by talking about how I tested, or I plan to test, my new backyard game, and also like ways that I think in hindsight, now that we're having this conversation, selfishly, I wish we had this conversation a month ago because it would have saved me some time and money, is ways I think I could have tested it better. And then I want to hear,
I don't want to give you cheap, fast ways. I want you to write a big check and make this business work. I'm sick of this testing and experimenting for you, Alex.
I want to hear, and after I talk about that, I want to hear the ways that you've tested or haven't tested any of your 3 businesses within Gateway. So I talk about it ad nauseum, but if you're a new listener, I'm building the Plunge. It's in axe throwing for your backyard. And instead of axes, you throw plungers. And so my plan to test if there's viability for this game has been to do 2 things. It's been to create social videos of me playing friends in the game, post them on TikTok and Instagram and all the places you can put short form social, and drive the viewers of that video to a landing page. And on that landing page, you can put in an email and ultimately reserve a spot to get the game. And I'm launching on Kickstarter. I think it's a good plan, but here's where I think I went wrong. So I've spent $20,000 on the game so far. 12,000 of that is R&D. 8,000 is an agency that's helping with me with my Kickstarter launch. I actually think there's 2 ways I could have done this way cheaper and gotten more of a sense earlier on. The first is, I think I could have actually not created the product at all. I think I could have created a high-res 3D drawing by an artist on Fiverr of the actual game, have a landing page that I drive traffic to, and then just drive people to it and see if people would put $1 down to reserve their spot to buy the game. The second way is I could have, instead of using a product designer in Brooklyn who I've spent $12,000 with, I could have just built the most crude version of the game myself, literally going to Home Depot one weekend, get a face and 2 pieces of plywood, and just play it at the park for a few weekends straight, see if people come up, see people's experience with the game, create those social videos, do the same exact thing, but not spend $12,000 in R&D. Now, I will be somewhat kind to myself and say, I do wonder what is the threshold of getting good enough information to know if you're getting good signal versus bad signal? Said differently, like if I went to that park with like the crude thing that I built and no one came up to me, does that mean that I shouldn't pursue the game? Like, how do you think about that?
Yeah, the experience of quote unquote testing an idea, as he said, is so riddled with false positives and false negatives that it's kind of hard. Like I think some of the venture studios like Atomic, those guys have done so many things that they actually have good benchmarks. And I realized when we started doing some of the experimenting, I'm like, oh, great, I see numbers, but I don't know what they mean. And like they actually have benchmarks. They know that if they start running some fake Facebook ads and certain things happen, that actually means something versus not.
Right.
And I think it is hard to know. And there is this tension. Like when I started Ampush, and I got you guys did a little different with Morning Brew, but like I do think that commitment is worth a lot. Just saying, I'm going to try this for 2 years. I'm going to go all in. I'm not going to do it as a side project. And I think, depending on your age and your personal situation, like I think that can be a really valuable thing. That doesn't mean you're not going to do experiments and tests and work your way into things, but it is a way to be, because you will find ways to figure it out. And everything I've ever done the first or second time doesn't work anyway. So it's kind of tough to
wait, is that how you approached it? Is that how you approached it with Kahani? Like with Kahani, were you just like, mobile sites could be better, they should look more like TikTok, I'm going to go build this, and I'm going to dedicate time until I find a solution that looks like something like this people want?
Not exactly. So I think the concept of, we call them waypoints internally, which is kind of a sailing metaphor. Some people call them stage gates, or like video game levels that you can't get to level 2 until you beat the boss on level 1. And I think it's a good framing for some of this stuff. So, our first thing we did it in probably less than a month, was we created a thing that was just the circles at the top of the screen. And they just linked to other parts of the site. And we got like 5 friends who had Shopify sites to throw it on their sites. And the only question we were wondering that our stage gate was, will people actually engage with this? Because if only 3% of the traffic engages with it, this is the kind of a DOA business. Like it's not going to have any impact on the site.
So was it, there was no actual content? It was literally just the circles. And if you clicked on the circle
with a thumbnail, and you would click and it would nav you to another part of the site.
Yeah. It would just go to like the pants page of the site.
Correct. But what we saw was that it got like 15-20% engagement. It was the highest engaged with thing on the page. So boom, we got really excited. And not only that, but in many cases, it actually helped sales, because it sort of directed a person to the hero product. And we said, oh, that's really interesting.
How do you know it was the circles and not just the fact that it was the highest thing on the page?
We didn't, but it's not important, right? Because as long as that's how you're going to sell the product.
I got it.
It's like, how do you know that the cologne makes you smell good or get women? Like, it doesn't matter if you're going to use the cologne. Like it doesn't really matter what the issue is, right? But so then from there, the next stage gate was like, okay, let's build the actual front end of the product. We didn't build a CMS. Like we were uploading the content via spreadsheets and JSON files when we did our private beta. That's how scrappy we were about it. And then we just wanted to see, like, does it actually hold up as the whole product? Does it actually work? Got a bunch of, gave the software away. We did charge people a little bit. We charged them a few $100 a month just to make sure they weren't just being nice to me. And we wanted to see what's going to happen. And again, we saw a strong performance from it in terms of revenue lift and conversion. And that's when we actually decided to raise funding for it. Right. And so think about that for a second.
You didn't have like the CMS that companies could actually load their stuff into until after you raised money.
Well, no, we started building that after the private beta, and then we started raising money. But like, we definitely stage gated it out to figure it out. And I think the other thing I kind of onced over it, so I think it's an important thing, is we got out and we sold the product to people. And one of the beauties of B2B anything, like the original business of Ampush, there was this other division we started, and then we realized Facebook ads were going to be huge. And I was talking to this young guy who worked for us right after the sale. And I'm like, do you remember how we started in the Ampush of today? And he's like, I completely remember it. And he's like, and here's how we started it. We got on a whiteboard. I drew a grid for 20 slides. We mocked up a story of how Facebook was going to take over the world and how we were the best in the world at Facebook. And we went and we just went to LinkedIn and said, hey, will you meet with us? Will you meet with us? Hey, daily deals. Hey, gaming companies. Like we knew who was spending on it. And after 10 phone calls, 2 said yes. And guess what? We had a business, right? And so like that, to me, B2B, the beauty of it is that's how we started Growth, exactly how we started Growth Assistant. We put a little collateral. We had a website. We had a deck. And we started getting on the phone and calling people and saying, hey, this is the thing you need. And that couple, oh yeah, that's a great thing. I'd love to get that. And so that's the one thing about B2B that I think is beautiful is you can just get on the phone and start pitching people. You see their reactions, you get their feedback. It's in some ways it's way easier than B2C in my experience. B2C, I think the thing I oftentimes push people on, they'll have stuff like, there's a guy recently who was like, we want to sell mindfulness to insurance companies in order to like bring down medical bills. Oh, that's kind of cool. Like, and that had this whole plan for like a software module and how they were going to code. A huge plan. And I was like, can like start a newsletter on this topic for HR people to do mindfulness? Like, could you just see if anyone's going to sign up and read the things that you're going to write first? Because that, dude, it costs nothing to do that, right?
Totally.
And there's a little bit of pushback, and I said, yeah, you can do all that big stuff you're talking about, but man, if you don't get people engaging with you on this, or not only that, you'll also learn there's a complexion or color that you learn in any of these things that I think is also not necessarily yes or no binary, but like, oh, what type of content do they engage with? When do people reply to emails? What gets people? And so it's not just the yes or no signal. Your whole example of the plunge, whether 5 people showed up to play it or 25 people showed up, that may or may not have been a signal. But what would be really interesting is what people liked about the game, what they found annoying about it. That's where the color and the complexion come in. It'd be really interesting if you charge people $2 to play the plunge to see. Oh, I'm not paying you $2 for that. Like, no way.
Totally. Yeah, no, I think that's interesting. And it's funny that you bring up the idea of creating a newsletter, because I do think like content, we live in an age where actually the ability to create content so cheaply is like such a massive unlock that entrepreneurs didn't have 20 years ago to test businesses. And I was actually thinking about this so there are a few business ideas that I've been thinking about that I was kind of taking through this process of if I wanted to test them as low cost but high fidelity as possible, what would that look like? So one of the ideas is basically a like consumer reports or consumer review for startup software. So like a site that has reviews and ratings on startup software. And so I was saying to myself,
G2?
like, yeah, exactly. Just like a G2 that's more kind of startup focused. Like I would say a lot of founders I talk to don't really know G2. I feel like it has more of a stranglehold on enterprise. And so I was thinking to myself, like, okay, I have this idea of call it like a newer, better branded, startup facing G2. How do I test it to know if there's appetite? And so it's like last night I actually by accident started testing it. So last night I tweeted out basically a tweet saying, I haven't built a business in 8 years and I have to figure out all these tools I'm using again to build the business. And I listed out the stack of software that I'm using, and it blew up overnight. It has 3,000 likes, 1 million views. And I was like, okay, this is interesting. What does that tell me? It tells me there's some level of interest in people understanding the software stack that startup founders use. What I also learned from it is one of the people that I listed in that tweet was the person who helped me with trademarking. It's a lawyer who's big on Twitter for helping with trademarks. And I DM'd him saying, just out of curiosity, did this drive any business for you? And he responded basically being like, I don't know how I'm ever going to be able to repay you, but I am climbing out of the deepest hole of DMs right now. I'm like, okay, that's really interesting. Like drove a lot of traffic for him. By the way, my other idea about affiliating my life. Now I'm thinking about how do I become an affiliate for all of these tools I listed. But so then I'm like, okay, there's something interesting here. How do I take this a step further? And I started thinking, okay, maybe I start with a newsletter where I send out a newsletter on a specific type of software. Maybe it's HR software. And I go through all of the big startup HR software platforms, their rating, their pros and cons, see what people think about it. What are the questions they ask? And so like to me,
you can start. Did I tell you about my idea? I had an idea I wrote up like a couple of years ago called SaaS Pass.
No.
And so like have you heard of Founders Card?
Yeah. It's the card. You get all the benefits.
Yeah, so it's like an Amex Platinum kind of, right? You pay $500 a year and then you get like all these discounts. And so that business allegedly, rumor has it, does like 8 figures in top line and 80% EBITDA margin.
I have heard that as well.
and so I was like, man, it's such a good business model because you go to the companies and you tell them, hey, the discount you're giving me is branding. It's like marketing for you.
Yep.
And then you go to people who need the stuff and you can like, so if we sold SaaS Pass $1,000 a startup, right? You pay us $1,000 and then in exchange, you immediately get 10,000 in value because we get you a cheaper subscription to HubSpot and Dropbox and all the, Gusto, all the things you named, basically Mercury Bank. You get $200 immediately at Mercury Bank when you sign up. Boom, dude. Once you get your newsletter going, that's the business that we launch on top of it.
Seriously, I love that.
SaaS Pass.
I like that. No, seriously, I kind of want to start that now. So for people that are listening, I just want to make this kind of concrete.
By the way, thanks for mentioning Growth Assistant in that tweet.
Well, I don't, it requires making money as a business in order to hire one of your growth assistants.
That's how you get team. That's their first team members. Those are my first team members I had were growth assistants.
It's true. I will be using growth assistant the second that the Plunge actually brings in customers. For now, we're just a business that holds a shit ton of plungers as inventory. But I just want to talk about for listeners who have a startup idea or have built businesses and they're thinking about testing new ideas, a few, I would say, proven models for testing your ideas. And Jesse, if you have feedback, you like them, don't like them, let me know. So the first one, and I didn't come up with all these ideas myself. I tweeted about it because normally whenever I have a question, I'm like, I don't have all the answers in my head. I'm going to ask people on the internet that are smarter than me. And so the first idea, and I would say this is the most common way that people talk about low cost, high fidelity testing of an idea. And it's known as the smoke test, which is basically you build a dummy site. You have a call to action that drives someone to do something, either put in an email, sign up, pay, and you just drive a small amount of paid ads through Facebook ads or Google ads to the site. If you get traction, that means there's some signal there, which is referred to as smoke. And the old saying, where there's smoke, there's fire.
The only caveat I'll say to that is back to what we were saying in the beginning, which is is 2% conversion traction, or is 10%, or is 1%? And I think I remember asking around when we were thinking about doing this for the brand we launched, and it is important to get some benchmarks of how good of an email sign up. Nick Sharma was like, dude, if you get a 50% email sign up for a product, that is going to be a huge product. If you're getting 15%, that's not really that compelling. And so I think a good scientist, you actually have to have a pretty dialed in hypothesis that you're actually trying to test with. In my case, what we did was we looked a little bit at nominal email sign up, but what we were actually doing was testing 4 brands. And that was let's call the brand name this. Let's, and that was our way of figuring out.
And is this for Kahani or Growth Assistant?
For Unbloat. Yeah. For the supplement business. So we had Puforia wasn't working. We wanted to shut it down, and we thought we had a good formula, and we tested Puforia, Rhythm, Feather, Lightness, Unbloat, and then Unbloat. We tested a few aspirational things, and Unbloat was just way better than all of them with the same ingredients, the same general branding, other than the name. And so
interesting.
For $500 or maybe $1,000, we got to get really good conviction on the name for what we were launching. But that's not the same thing as validating the business or not validating the business. Just to be clear.
Right. Totally. There's another clever one that I saw, which is, do you know Ankur Nagpal? He founded Teachable. So founded Teachable. Now he's working on Ocho Wealth, which their wedge product is solo 401ks for solo entrepreneurs. And the way he got validation for this business is he posted a tweet thread about a friend's business that does solo 401ks, and he described what the solo 401k is. And then in his CTA, he said, if you want an intro to my friend, let me know. His friend was him. He got a ton of DMs by entrepreneurs asking for an intro. And that was the validation for him to go build the product.
Yeah, I love it.
And then there's one other I want to share, and then we can move on to Startup AMA, which is this has worked really well for authors, but I think the idea, or at least the concept, is applicable really to kind of any business or project also. So there's this idea of what I call the content ladder. So how do you size your bets in terms of time or money appropriately for the validation you're seeing? So how do you start with a tweet that turns into a thread, that turns into a essay, that turns into a book? So just a few examples that I found crazy. Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel, best-selling book now. People think he just, what was lightning in a bottle, wrote this thing and instant success. This guy has been working on this book for a decade. It was an expanded version of a shorter free report that he wrote on his blog years ago called The Psychology of Money. Similar type of story. Malcolm Gladwell, Tipping Point, one of his most popular books ever. Tipping Point is just a book that was written based on a New Yorker article that got a ton of traffic. That article was called The Tipping Point. So like this is the model for every writer. By the way, Mark Manson, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. He had an article called The Not Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. And a publisher had approached him saying, hey, dude, you should write a book. Like a lot of people are doing this now. And he's like, I have no idea what I'm going to write about. And they were like, just look at what your most trafficked article is ever. So I think just to me, an interesting lesson there is how do you just keep sizing the bet with time or money more and more as you get some level of signal?
I think the whole back to the newsletter thing, like I every time an entrepreneur says, I have this idea for a B2C thing of blah, 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 I'm always just like, cool, why don't you start a newsletter around it? You'll learn your customer better. You'll have some basis to launch something off of. You'll validate whether or not people care about this issue or not. The other thing I like about it, by the way, is, and I don't say this, but I'll say it here, is it's going to prove to you how hard shit is. Because getting a newsletter, getting a 10,000 people to sign up for a newsletter about whatever you think is a really big problem they have in the world and topic, if they're not going to sign up for that, you'll see how hard it is to get Twitter people out there, in Twitter signing up. You'll see how hard it is to get people who they're going to unsubscribe from your thing. So it actually puts you through the ringer, especially for first-time entrepreneurs who haven't experienced like how challenging the stuff can actually be to get going. And that's the other reason I love it. I think my favorite one for B2B businesses is like make a 10, 15 slide deck and set up 10 to 20 meetings and pitch the thing, sell it, and see if anybody wants to buy it. And even if at the end of the call, if they go, yeah, I'm in, you go, okay, cool. Like, thank you so much for buying that. Like, it's going to be 3 months till it's ready. And that's fine. Or be very honest with where you are, but still sell them something.
Totally. And on the B2B side, I was actually reading a really good story about, Buffer, which is like the social media scheduling tool. Uh-huh. So basically, I think they do a lot more than this today, but the original idea was just a better scheduler for sending out tweets than what Twitter offered. And the guy who founded it, he wrote this post in 2011 where he was basically like, this one feature that Twitter had for scheduling, I thought that could be a whole product where the whole focus was there. I had a landing page that I sent people to. They put in email addresses. I got a bunch of emails. So then I added another page, which was for people to say the product isn't here yet, but when it comes in the future, I'll let you know. Then once he knew there was enough validation there, he added another page where it was basically you put your email address in. The second page goes to pricing, and there are 3 pricing tiers. There was a free service, a $5 a month, and a $20 a month. And he looked for all that traffic. If any people would say they'd pay for the service, he got 500 people to say they'd pay $20 a month. And then he started actually building the product. So I think at the end of the day,
there's a couple underlying things, and I keep giving you shit about the plunge. Like if 100 people or 500 people will pay $20 for a product, the world is 8 billion people. The United States is 330 million people. We live in such a wonderful, large $20 trillion economy that you can actually feel pretty confident that if you could get 500 people to pay for something, you'll probably be able to get 50,000 or even more potentially, right? And I think the second thing that's underlying all of this that I think is just important to call out is people oftentimes don't want to do stuff like this because they're afraid, like their ego, like I don't want to put myself out there. Like the classic feedback from the LinkedIn founder, Reid Hoffman, is like, your first product version of your product should embarrass you. Like the first version of Kahani was embarrassing. It was the freaking circles on a page that we wanted people to click on, right? And so you do have to build that muscle of like whatever you want to call it, shamelessness / just you're willing to go out and put yourself out there and own where you are in the journey. And I think I want to call that out because it's easy to talk about testing as like a academic subject. In my experience, the resistance is usually coming from someone going, no, I have to be fully dress rehearsed and everything until I can finally get that thing out there. And it's like, that's just not how it works. You got to get out there ugly. Like it took Adrian really a lot for me to go, dude, we're going to sell this. I have no idea what the follow-up email is going to be. I have no idea. Like the website is like half a page on Squarespace. Like it's just not how she's used to operating, right? Most people aren't used to operating that way. And so I want to call that out because I think underneath all of these things, you have to gain comfort with incompleteness, information, tiny pieces of things to actually kind of get the ball rolling. And it stays, even as a company gets bigger, you can get an initiative out, again, cheap and fast to make something work or not.
Totally. Yeah, I think this idea of just in general as a founder getting really good at operating in the gray, and people who haven't been founders being very uncomfortable with operating in the gray, which is basically your whole job as an early stage founder, is a massive point. Last thing I want to talk about before we wrap up for the day is we're doing a little startup AMA, and we, as I mentioned last episode, we have gotten bombarded with emails because I decided to make either the really smart or horrible decision of asking our listeners to write into us, which I'm going to do right now, by the way. I don't even know how long we've been recording, but it feels like 50 minutes to an hour. If you're an hour into this episode, it means you're a great listener. It means you clearly are getting value from this podcast. It also means we want to meet you and talk to you. So shoot an email to thecrazyones@morningbrew.com. Just write hi in the subject line, and we'll get a conversation going. It'll take you 10 seconds, but we get to build a relationship with our listeners. So anyway, we got a bunch of questions from our listeners, and I'm going to read one of them, and I want to get your thoughts on it. This is from Larissa Loden, and Larissa said, so my friends and I debate this a lot, which is sharing profitability. What are the pros and cons of sharing your profitability? Do it company-wide, only with leadership, only the owner? What have you done, and what are your lessons learned about sharing information with your business?
Do you want to take the con side and I can take the pro side? What do you actually? What's your actual answer to this?
I mean, I feel like my view is, I'd say my general policy has always been share as much as possible.
But did you guys share profitability with Morning Brew?
We shared profitability in the early days.
Why'd you stop?
Because at some point, I want to say part of it was when we were bought. It was part of being within a larger company. We didn't necessarily think it was something that the acquirers would necessarily want. But I think also part of it was just you have less control when you have 300 employees versus 20 employees. And I think just to quickly say with profitability, my biggest fear, and this would be a fear-based action, my biggest fear would be if we share profitability of Morning Brew, if people look at what the profit is at Morning Brew and they say, damn, they're really profitable, why are they not paying their people more? Like, to me, that feels like an easy pushback. That's the other side I would say is if you want to build a culture where people are treated like adults and they also feel like owners of the business, sharing as much as you can about the business is a really important thing. So I actually would say I am pro sharing profitability, but there are very real trade-offs to consider. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the cons are information getting leaked out to the world that you don't want to get leaked out, because obviously the bigger you get, there's employee things there. I think there's
and just talk about that for a second. If like, I don't know, even just use the example of Ampush or whoever, if you were sharing profitability and an employee ended up sending that to some reporter, like what do you view as like the possible repercussion of that, of it being public?
I think like it's competitive intelligence for people who are your competitors. I think it could just be like a weird data point that you don't want, that, you know, people start to compare data points externally and go, are you growing? Are you not growing? Like just information you may or may not need out there that doesn't help the cause of the business. If you have clients, if you're an Ampush, like your issue about employees, I would push back on and say, you got to have the big boy or girl conversation with them that says, look, there's a market for labor and I pay you at the top of that market, right? And which you like, I believe you should pay in the top quartile of the market. And that doesn't, why would I pay you more money just because the company makes more money? The whole point is I want to pay you really well based on your value in the marketplace, which is sort of to me, the client conversation is a slightly different one, which is if clients aren't knowing your profitability, they may or may not feel like, you know, that's fair or unfair, depending on the nature of the relationship and some other pieces of it. But, you know, I think I'm very pro sharing everything. Interestingly, not all not all the CEOs of the companies that I'm building as part of Gateway feel that way. And so like we've had to kind of figure out the comfort zones of everyone and make it a clear thing.
So are they three different policies for your three Gateway businesses or no?
More or less.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, they're all agreed upon, but like, it's not, you know, there's certain things I think are important and other ones where I'm like, I don't think I need to, you know, this doesn't have to be a part of the culture, but I agree with you. The more you have control over it, the better it is. I mean, in Ampush, we were focused on revenue growth for the first 5 years, and man, everyone knew our revenue every day. I knew it. It was in channels. It was talked about. And then when Red Ventures invested, they were like, guys, screw revenue. We don't care about revenue. We just care about EBITDA. And then we started worshiping EBITDA. And it actually took us probably 12 to 15 months culturally to change the mindset. But then we told everyone the EBITDA, like they would come into the business review meetings and go, this is the EBITDA of my relationship. This is how I'm going to grow the EBITDA of my relationship. And I thought the value of people knowing what was moving the bottom line and actually orienting around it, that's how we bonus people. Like it became such a powerful force. And I think the fear of a lot of founders, especially the earlier the company is, you're like, well, what am I? I'm just this little company. Somebody's going to see what I'm doing and they're going to realize, like every entrepreneur feels like they're getting away with something a little bit in those first couple of years, especially you're like, ooh, I just made this thing up and it's making money. This is weird. I don't want to share that.
It's the imposter syndrome equivalent of a small business.
Totally. Right. And you're just like, and what I found, like when you drop that and you kind of go, no, like a person who's coming to work for me for a salary to be in this experience is choosing that very purposefully. If they wanted to be in my shoes, they would be starting my business. Some might join and leave and start a competitor or whatever. But like, I just think there's a tremendous value in sharing all the information and letting people make good decisions and good problem solving around the actual problem you're solving for. Then, and related to that is alignment, right? It's like, if I'm pulling for something and you're pulling for something different because I'm not giving you the information, like that's just me shooting myself in the foot.
So it sounds like you're pro sharing profitability.
I'm definitely pro it. Yeah, no question.
and I'd finish by saying...
oh, by the way, everyone knows it. Anyone who can do basic math knows it. So the idea that you're not sharing it actually seems totally silly.
Like condescending.
They know, most people know what it costs you to deliver the thing you're delivering and they know what the overhead, I mean... People can estimate it. They can figure it out.
And also, by the way, I know this is a little bit different. It's not apples to apples, but your point about it's possibly a risk because your partners or customers could look at your profitability and be like, oh, you're overcharging us. Is like, I mean, when you're a public company, you're reporting your profitability, you're reporting your bottom line. Like I would assume the customers of every public company aren't coming knocking on their door being like, hey, you have to charge us less. And that just comes down to having a differentiated product that people feel like they're getting way more value than what they pay for.
Yeah. I mean, MasterCard and Visa have 50% operating margins. Nobody can replace them. So
it's wild. So, okay. So the crazy consensus is sharing profitability is good, but understand the trade-offs that it brings with it. With that, anything else before we wrap up, Jesse?
Nope. Have a great week.
Have a great week, everyone. And remember to email us at thecrazyones@morningbrew.com. Please blow up our inbox. I promise we'll respond. Talk to you guys soon. Bye. Thank you guys so much for watching this episode of The Crazy Ones. If you're an entrepreneur or a builder and want more great startup content, make sure to subscribe on our YouTube channel or wherever you get your podcasts.